Hello and good afternoon to the very last session of this year's Berlinale Talents. We are happy to have you all here, to have you here. Thanks for being with us. It's our last session. We have so many people on the panel. I'm happy and excited to hear more about you. And I kindly introduce our moderator, Sebastian Markt, who will present and host for the evening. Enjoy.
Yeah, so welcome everyone to Future Intense. The idea of this panel is mostly to have some space for an exchange between two collectives who've been making films. They share some similarities in the sense that both their work concerns questions of hierarchies, of power structures. In a more specific sense, something that unites them is that their work in both cases focuses on questions of migration, post-migration, of racialized division of labor and distribution of power in Singapore and in Germany. There are also questions of queer politics and aesthetics, which were somewhat foundational in the one case and are important to some of the members in the other case. So I'll start with a brief introduction. On the far side from me, we have 13 Little Pictures, a collective that I think it's like 2/3 of you all together who are present now. A collective that's been around for about 10 years, has in those 10 years produced more than 15 feature films and quite a large number of shorts. And I think you also organized film labs for some time. There is Lee Wan Bin, who is the director of I Dream of Singapore, which premiered in Panorama this year. He also co-directed Fundamentally Happy, with Tan Bee Tam, who's also here with us. He worked and I think the connections between their films and their collaborations already gives you a sense of how they work. He was the director of photography for Demons by Daniel Hui, who's sitting here, and also of Red Dragonflies and As You Were by Liao Xie, who's the fourth member. Xie Kai is currently finishing his feature debut, Light of a Burning Moth, as a solo director. And Bee Tiam, as we said, was the co-director of Fundamentally Happy, is also finishing a feature, and was the producer of Red Dragonflies and As You Were. And Daniel, Demons is his third feature. The other two were Eclipses and Snakeskin. And then, located in Berlin, we have Jünglinge, who presented Futur Drei, No Hard Feelings, also in Panorama this year. They all three of them studied in Hildesheim, focusing a lot on questions of queer and feminist theory, of post-colonial studies, and from there started collaborating on short films, and now their first feature for Futur Drei was directed by Faraz Shariat. Raquel Molt, who's sitting next to him, was responsible for casting and also worked as an assistant director. I think it's maybe also something that we can talk about, because your idea of casting is quite complex and also says a lot about the ideas you have into collaborating and into dealing with issues that are prevalent in our society. And then there's Paulina Lorenz, who developed and produced Futur Drei. For some idea, more visual idea of their work, we're now going to see two clips, which is the opening sequence of I Dream of Singapore, and then scene from No Hard Feelings. And I think it's already interesting because both clips will show you some ideas of individuals in constellations with others, and some questions will arise. So for a first round, maybe you want to talk about the kind of necessities you saw, the desires you had for forming a collective as sort of basis for your work. I think there are microphones on your tables, whoever wants to go first. Do you want to start, maybe?
I think we studied at a place that is very much shaped by theater work, so it's an environment where we got to know each other. Most people studying there do some sort of post-dramatic collective stuff, meaning that they do not just work on the content, but also are on stage and presenting the content they've developed with their own bodies. And I feel like that this environment somehow inspired us to maybe derive strategies from that for our own practice as filmmakers. But then I also think that since we did not go to film school and did not really know what it means to produce and create and write and blah, 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 we just ended up doing everything together collectively. So I think it just gave us a lot of support and also helped us to be more confident about what we do, because we had a lot of insecurities and maybe also questions regarding the actual act of writing, producing. And I mean, I also think that talking about hierarchies and maybe even just community in a very broad sense, how do we want to many questions we asked ourselves. We're going down a road that is seeking maybe for more inclusive, communal, and fair ways of working. And I think that was somehow maybe the starting point. But
although I think actually because I'm just trying to think of it now, and I think it actually started because Faraz and I started working together, and Raquel came a year later because you started your studies a year later. And I think at the beginning you came to me asking if I wanted to produce something for you. So I think there was in the beginning this kind of clear departmentalizing of you're the director and I'm the producer. And then I think we just realized that every part of the process, both on the creative side and on the financing, organization, crew, putting together the crew side, just worked better when we talked together and when we did everything kind of eye to eye. So I think it was maybe a process that didn't start from saying we want to be a collective, but that kind of developed into it because we realized that we had such similar ambitions, such similar political viewpoints. And that also means that there's this openness for anyone who also shares these kind of creative and political visions to be a part of the collective, because it's something that's like always shaping its size and its way of working.
Collectivity in practice.
I think for 13 Little Pictures, it comes about, really because we were, first of all, friends. And as friends, I think, and people who love films, watching films together, after that, trying out perhaps, film exercises, that becomes something that is, something that we started to send to film festivals, and we realized after a while that perhaps we should come together to do it in a more formal way. So it really started with, I think, White Days, that was directed and shot and edited by Yuan Bin. That also has two actors, which is Daniel Hui and Yo Siu Hua. So it is a very, I think, indie way of making a feature film over a weekend, with him and 3 other friends, and them just talking. So I think they've been doing it for a while, and when I first saw the film, I thought, wow, that's such a genius film. And I volunteered to, bring the film to submit to a festival, and we got into a festival, and we started to think, should we then call ourselves something? And that's when 13 Little Pictures comes about, and we started with the kind of perhaps validation with an audience and with the programmers programming the films that we make, started to make more films. And that's when I think Yuan Bin started to shoot for more of our stuff, and that's when I started to produce for other people in the collective, and that's when I think we started to make more works, because the festivals and the audience started to follow our works, and we find that there is then an audience out there, for what we are making. Yeah. You guys want to add?
Maybe I say something. I think I remembered one thing that when 13 Little Pictures first started, I think we asked ourselves a lot, like, who are we and what is our identity? And I always remember Bitiam said something. Then he said that he felt that filmmakers should own their own film, and he knew many cases where filmmakers, because they don't own their own film, they lost control of their film, and he find that I think a very sad thing. So he wanted for 13 Little Pictures that we make our own film. We be financially responsible for the film. We make films together, that was something very touching to me. I think I think that's what I remember.
I find that interesting because thinking about the moments where we work collectively aside of the creative process, maybe of discussing what happens and how we want to maybe approach the film from a political standpoint, I think that the production work is definitely that combines, we are all 3 producers of the film and very, very closely worked on the production together. And I think that is something to highlight because in many projects, I feel like that the production is something that is not so much seen as a part of the work that is rewarded or seen or maybe appreciated that much, and also not so much included in the creative process of shaping the structures within which a project is being shot or so on. And I feel like that maybe even more, this is something where we can rely on each other a lot, and also, it's not that it works always, because, for example, during the shooting, I was not able to do anything anymore for the production because I was directing it, and that created maybe some sort of structure that we weren't really ready for. But I feel like that what you just said about owning the film and also being the ones financially and also maybe like from an entrepreneur aspect, is very much also something that shapes the collectiveness.
What I found really interesting was what you said at the beginning, that you started as like friends and then you realized, okay, we want to work together. And for me, Paulina asked me before this talk what makes us a collective, and I said for me, like Paulina and Faraz are like one of my best friends, and I couldn't imagine working with other people because I think it's not only the way we are working together, it's also like the trust you have, that you have the same political visions, and also I think the way we are talking within our like production process is not so like professional, but more how friends are talking to each other. Found that interesting.
I really liked, I saw on your website that you had a quote about, I don't know who said it, but about making films not for money, not for being a part of history, but for your friends, and kind of and I thought that was so nice, because I think for some reason we're still stuck in this idea, or I catch myself being stuck in this idea that you kind of start out making films with your friends, and then at some point you must progress into like something else and something more professional. And I think it's so nice to challenge and question this idea of progressing into something, and saying that you can also, through this logic of self-containment that you talk about, be able to have this very professional and successful in like objective terms, but also hopefully for you successful way of making films for such a long time now. I think that's really mind-blowing. And I was wondering about this thing that you said, that you have the freedom because you all kind of take on these different roles for each other and you don't really need so much outside. I'm wondering, how did you actually acquire the skills? Because we talked behind the stage about that you were also cinematographer for Demons, and like, where did you get these skills from? Yeah.
So I went to film school, but I was trained as a cinematographer. I was naturally interested in photography first, and so I took the role of the cinematographer first. And after a few features, I wanted to try directing. But I do enjoy shooting films with them. And as you said, we are really friends first, so it doesn't feel like a professional shoot. We're just having fun. And it's really fun. So it's different from when I take jobs outside, where I really like performing a DP, being a DP. But with them, it's really having fun, exploring new ideas. We can shoot overtime, and just long hours we don't mind, because we are really just enjoying the process of filmmaking. And I think this is very important, and this is where we see the creative mistakes, the accidents that come, and there's no boss to look over us. Oh, this is wrong, this is what. But we decide what we want to make, and we explore very free. There's a freedom in expression.
I mean, I guess a question to both of you: do you feel that this is something that needs to be protected in a special way? Because working within the confines of an existing industry, even if you have your circle of collaborators or collective context, you're still part of a system that functions in a certain way. And I was wondering what your experiences are in that regard.
I think, it's a super interesting question, and we talked about this before, because I think when you work with like other people's, for example, majors or other companies, it's also a question of like money distributing. For example, we work in very different positions when we work with other companies or blah blah. And for example, casting is something that is always like very low paid, and it's different to directing. So we really have to deal with hierarchies within other production contexts than our own collective. And I was also like wondering how you guys like talk about money, or how like the money distribution in your collective is handled, because in these days I think it's really like a topic for us.
taking turns. So actually, I guess I should also say that one of the reasons we formed the collective was because although Singapore has many resources and is very rich and actually gives a lot of money to cinema, but for our kinds of cinema that is more experimental or independent or queer or political, there is zero funding. So part of actually having a collective is a necessity. So for example, for my films, up to today, I'm still self-financing most of my films for the material costs. But for labor costs, it's free because we've been helping each other on our shoots, you know. So we basically, it's like we'd help, you know. And so one thing shot for me without being paid at all. And Kai will come and help as an assistant director, and of course, Bitiam produced for me, you know. So I think it's a necessity in this kind of a very alienating scenario of capitalism, and how we manage to cope is to actually form a collective to produce these films. So yeah, we're very much outside of the industry, even up to today, yeah.
But, I mean, maybe that's a very direct question, but where do you get the money from? Cause,
for me?
Yeah, I mean, you as a collective, because
okay.
because for us, I mean, we just started in January to work full time, and it's us three that are in an office every day, 45, 50 hours a week. And a question we ask ourselves is, how do we get paid? Because it's been insane that we had this moment a few days ago, looking at each other, saying, what are we doing? We don't get any euro. We're working so hard, and I mean, where do we get the money from? And then, like, to realize, okay, maybe you have to take money from other projects that are funded a bit, and you would normally put every money in the project because you love the project, but maybe that's not the case anymore. Maybe we just pay ourselves, even though we don't work on it that much. But yeah, I mean, that's just a question for us, because also I think something that is important to flag regarding our collectiveness is that there are some creatives attached to our collective that we work with so often. Simon Wu, for example, who is sitting here, is our DP, and we've shot every single project with him that we've done so far. But he has also got another professional career, and for us, he shaped so much about the creative vision. But it's also questions about how do you, as producers who are there to get some money in, find that resources to share, because we work for free for each other as well, but we don't, yeah.
Maybe I'll say a bit first and then you can continue. Because for me, so every film of us is different, and we get resources from different places. So I can talk for myself, and basically I just work for 4 years and I save up every month, and that's how I make my film, which doesn't cost a lot because I do everything. We do everything basically. So I'm the director, editor, costume designer, wardrobe, props. I do the schedule. I do everything, you know. And then Wan Ping shoots every day, you know. And Jie Kai will come and help if he was free. So basically, all we don't have a lot of money, but we have a lot of time. I think that's an advantage of doing it independently. So. I mean, of course, we also have these questions all the time. Why are we doing this? Every 2 years, maybe, we have a crisis. Or I have a crisis. But then I guess ultimately it's about sacrifice. And maybe for us, you know, to exist in this kind of very hostile climate is, to some extent, sacrifice. And I'm fine with it still, for now. And maybe Bitiam can talk a bit more.
I think most of our earlier works, it is all self-financed. So meaning we have our full-time jobs, you know, either as a teacher or as a translator or as a director of photography. But I think we try to protect, the work that we do with the collective as really a playground where we have full, you know, creative freedom and control and ownership. So especially for our earlier works, it is all self-financed. So we would work, like what Daniel said, you know, and then after that we would pour our savings to make the film. And we would then help each other in terms of labor or in terms of equipment or in terms of other personal resources that we have that we would share freely with each other. It could be a mic, it could be a camera, it could be something else. It could be also perhaps, people who have liked one or two of our works that we will recommend to each other, in terms of, an actor or in terms of a crew. So along the way, I think we started to make a lot of friends of 13 Little Pictures who would then also volunteer their time as well as their resources to us. So when you see I Dream of Singapore, so the financier for that is actually Tiger Pictures, owned by a Singapore filmmaker called Glenn Gui. So he actually co-produced and associate produced a number of our recent works, for example, giving us, I think, not just finances, but also he acts for us, and he would open up some of his, venues, so that we can use. So I think along the ways we make friends who believe in what we are doing and who see what we are doing as something that is valuable and precious, who would then come on board as well to join us. Yeah. I think in the last few years as well, I think as our work gained more recognition in international festivals, we also become more successful in getting funding from the government. So some of our projects are funded by the Film Commission in Singapore. So that also helps us a lot, right, in terms of doing other kind of films. So I think it is something that we always challenges ourselves to make works which are different from each other and which is different from our previous work so that we can keep creating. So I think that's what we have been doing so far. Yeah.
Is there, in the time that you've been working together and doing this kind of work, is there a noticeable change for you that you see? Because I think that, often when people work in these kinds of economies of friendship, there comes a point where the question of going pro in the sense of the kind of resources you have, the kind of commitments you enter into comes up, and it can be something that that changes the fundamental texture of the kind of work you do. Is that something you experience?
I think we value perhaps the nature of amateur filmmaking as a kind of, friends coming together to make something that we love, not to be paid, but I think to enjoy the joy of creating. Yeah, so I think that's really what struck us when we see the works of, say, John Makers, and others, And the spirit, I think, is very important to us, not just the end result of the film, but also when we are making it, I think you can feel the spirit, of that, in the creating. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, we never really thought of whether the question of being professional, that was never really important to us. Like, even for me, making a good film is not super important because I feel like it's just living in the daily reality in Singapore. It's you don't have a lot of freedom in many things, and I don't think it's just Singapore. I think living in the capitalist reality, we don't have a lot of freedom. But filmmaking is this space where we have absolute freedom to do whatever we want, and I think that's something that we cherish. So I don't think of course it is a sacrifice, but it's also joy, to work in that way for us. I'm curious to know what you guys think.
Yeah, we haven't discussed how honest we're going to be here. But I think one thing is that as I directed the film that we are presenting right now, there's, for example, an agency that approached me that is super high profile, and through this agency, I haven't shot anything yet, but I do get offers where I can earn a lot of money through my directorial work. And it is a question that is in the room now, how we are going to approach that money, because obviously I have the opportunity to earn, I don't know, 30K in 2-3 months, and that work is based on a lot of work you have put into our projects, and this is a question that we are currently having within us, because when I understand right, you also have like jobs that are not in the film industry but more outside the film industry, and I think for us it's like we do also work in jobs, but they are also in the film industries based on the skills we've taught ourselves. And that is just, I think, a very delicate moment, because some people, like directors, can have easier access to money through commercial work or through jobs that are from the industry and where I don't have to work on the production side at all. And I think that's definitely something that we are facing as a collective, but also something that we are, I think, willing to discuss and to tackle, because, I mean, for me personally, it's sometimes, I do realize how much of internalized, like the internalized capitalistic approaches I have on this, because first thing is I worked so hard, this money is mine, but then I realized that's not really the case, because it should somehow also be your money, and we don't have a solution yet. We're working on a first project, a serial project where we get money, every one of us, but still I get more money than you do because I do the directorial work. So yeah, I think like most problems or changes are based on money and financial.
I think what for us just said, or what we are talking about loads these days, is also like questions of visibility and power dynamics, and who does the invisible work and who gets the recognition. And we're talking so much about like power dynamics within our films on screen. And I think now we really started a conversation about the power dynamics within our group. And also I think it's so interesting because in our group we have really different privileges as identities. And also like these privileges or not privileges go correlate with our like positions within the collective, like who does a lot of community or care work, who does the communication work, who is like facilitating the money, who can decide who gets the money and stuff. And I think we were really interested, like how you guys tackle these questions.
I think for us, we try to simplify it. So, like, when we come up with a project, it may cost perhaps $30,000. So whoever comes up with a project, will come up with the money. If perhaps, it is lacking $5,000 or a few $1,000s, some of us might chip in. But it also means that after the film is completed, if there's any money that comes in, you own it. So it's very clear. And some of us take a longer time to do our project. Some of us, the budget is slower, so we get to do it first. So it's quite straightforward. But in the recent years, when we start to have investors that comes in, so I think that's when, the investors will get a portion of it as well. But the majority of it, I think, would still be from like perhaps your deferred fees or perhaps, your own savings and stuff like that. So we try to make it clean in terms of the finances, so that it doesn't hold us back, in terms of the creation. Yeah. So that's what we do. We try to simplify as much as possible. Yeah. So that we also start thinking, do we really need perhaps 30,000? Right? Can we do it, in a different way? Right? So it goes back to the director in terms of owning the work and in terms of trying to make that possible. Yeah. So it is perhaps something that you can do with 30,000, is something that you can do with 5,000, but it becomes the decision of the director how he wants to do it, as well as when he wants to do it. Because he might not want to wait 5 years to do it, he might want to do it now, because it is something that he has to do at this moment. So we place a lot of the responsibility back to the director. Yeah, so that's how we deal with it. Yeah.
So it sounds a little bit like for you, the director of the film is kind of like a project manager in a way, because something that we're also struggling with right now is when you have different projects and you work as a collective, how do you keep track of everything, and you need to kind of divide up who makes time for meetings and says how and when you're going to communicate about what. And in our case, we're not all directing yet. I don't know what our aspirations are in the future. So we're also trying to think, how can we like be the contact person or like project manager is what I just said, or maybe facilitator is a better word for the different projects, to kind of split up the work so you don't constantly talk about everything all the time together. Yeah.
Not really. I think the director is not so much a project manager, but rather I think when I produce for them, I would ask them some of these questions which will determine the production schedule, which will determine the production budget. But I always defer to them in terms of how they want to make the film. So an example would be Red Dragonflies, the debut film of Jie Kai. So it is of a certain budget, but he feels it is really important, right, to make it within the year, because it is a film about youth. And he cannot wait 5 years. When he becomes much older, he would lose the feeling. So then we start to think, in terms of how do we make that possible? Yeah, so that is one example. But there are also other films like, say, my first film, which I'm still in post-production. It took us almost 4 years, right, to make the film, because it is a film which requires a certain budget to make it into like a alternate reality to what we see today. It is not a social realist film, so there's a need for costumes and for sets and stuff like that. So it takes a longer time to do. So it depends from project to project, and it depends on, I think, the director chatting how he wants to do it. Yeah, but we would have a producer, we would have a production manager, we would have other people who would plan it. Yeah.
Maybe we can also get, because I think that's something that's very interesting about all of your work, that those questions are present not only in the ideas you have about how you want to organize your work, but those are closely related to kind of narrative or aesthetic strategies that you that are visible in your work. I already heard you talk about how you. I mean, another aspect that that combines your work is that there is a lot of hybridity, of sort of shifting borders between documentary and fiction, of collaborating with non-actors or first-time actors. Maybe that's also something that you can talk about, how you approach these questions, because in your work those questions of how do you relate to people whose stories you tell come up, and I think it's something that's both very visible in I Dream of Singapore, which as is visible from the beginning is the story of it moves into the story of a migrant worker from Bangladesh in Singapore, who sort of suffers from the power structure there, and it's also quite obvious in your film, which deals with a very specific situation in Germany.
It's not so easy for me, I think, to answer, but I feel like that maybe what is interesting at this point is that for the feature film we worked with material from my biography, and this is changing now where we work on new projects, because Raquel has a script idea that derives from her biography. We maybe look into other narratives and also situations that are more fictional maybe than our previous work has been, and I feel like that still there is this idea of inviting other people into our collective to work on the projects we are pulling together, that have the perspective or can have some biographical material to put into that project. So I think that's something that is currently changing, because so far we've most of the time worked around representation and also I think ideas that very closely connect to our own identities, and now we are slowly looking into other situations where we will have to facilitate a financial and also a creative environment first, and then find the right person to come into our collective and work with us together. And that's something that I think we are facing.
I think for I Dream of Singapore, it's a documentary and it's real events happening, but I'm very conscious to make it more like fiction actually. So I was very interested to make it feel like a dream, maybe my subjective point of view of the migrant worker. So how I view him as a Singaporean. So I like to mix it up and use narrative storytelling and the way I edit it, and I do away with interviews or hard edits. Like there's no clear narrative. Yeah, so more like impressions and more like the emotions are more important for me. Maybe you can talk about demons or snake skin.
About
collaborations.
So I think one thing I want to say is that I was having a conversation with another filmmaker friend before coming here in Singapore, and she was like, "Well, you never invited me to be part of 13 Little Pictures," and I was telling her that it was never a plan to have like a very strict border between who is 13 Little Pictures and who is not. And I think at the very beginning, what we wanted to do was to actually build a community, because in Singapore especially, everybody is very atomized, and everybody is very in their own, bubble. And I think for independent filmmaking to exist in Singapore, we had to build connections between people. So I mean, we started with, of course, the 6 of us who were friends before, and we started working together already. But that's also the reason we wanted to do like so-called outreach, like film labs, because we wanted to extend this this kind of a spirit of collaboration to not just us 6 people, but to the entire region or the entire world. I mean, we start with our region, to be humble, of course. But then, so I was telling her that 13 Little Pictures for me at the beginning was almost like a meme. I wanted it to be like a meme, like anybody could be 13 Little Pictures, as long as we have this. As long as you want to help me or you want me to help you, then you can be 13 Little Pictures if you want to. So in the past, the 10 years that we've existed, we have projects who have already they're like almost done, and they just come to us and they say, "Can we be 13 Little Pictures?" Just so that we can be part of this community that we can be stronger in that sense, and people can pay attention to us. And we're like, sure, yeah, So it is kind of more like a spirit than something that's more concrete, like for example finances, So we have a registered company because just to ease when money comes in, then it has to come out somewhere. So it's to do the technical, financial stuff. But we do that like maybe once a year. We would just meet and do taxes. So basically, we go through the accounts and say, this is yours, and we'll pay out, So it's really, the administrative part is very, very little. And, we live all over the world too. So now Cheka is living in Japan. I've lived in the US for like 13 years. So it's also hard for us to come together and actually have like a day-to-day working financial entity. So yeah, really the only time we meet, like we have a reunion every year, is to do taxes. The sad reality of things.
What you also said at the beginning, I think I really could relate, because when I joined Faras and Paulina, Faras also told me that the idea of the collective at the beginning was that everybody who were attached to some project, they did music videos and stuff, can call themselves part of the collective, as long as they share the same maybe political or aesthetically vision. So some of the costume designers maybe said, okay, we are part of the collective, but then I think this collective idea really evolved because we thought, okay, we are maybe describe ourselves as the core of the collective because we develop the ideas together, or we initiate the new ideas we just currently working on.
We would have more clips prepared, but since we're already have about just half an hour left, if you don't mind, maybe let's use the time for the discussion rather. And I also want to give the audience a chance to ask questions or share their experiences in working in different constellations. One question that I have left is that since it's also a bit in the title of the program, there is an idea of queer cinema that not only relates to specific characters or topics, but also involves a question of different kinds of working together, different structures, or an idea that specific stories need specific forms to be told, and that something that can't be done through conventional narratives. Is that something that influenced you a lot in your films in this regard?
One thing that I think is very interesting in terms of both the work you do and how you describe your work with this kind of idea of playground or lab, trying out things, and also in our film, kind of future and like fictions of the future is a really big theme. And I think in another talk, Faraz said the other day that you also considered a queer strategy to kind of rewrite your own history, your own future, and kind of imagine these different possibilities of what you can be as a queer person, as a person with migration experience, as a person of color. And I think that's something that necessarily also has an effect on the form and kind of the aesthetic of the film. So I think that's something that I find very interesting, this idea of envisioning different futures and playing with fictions of what could be.
So I guess not all of our members in our collective are queer, and also not everyone is out, I have to say, because in Singapore we still have quite a repressive system where gay sex is criminalized among other things, but it's not that easy to come out in society. So I guess as the out queer person here, and who makes queer work, I can maybe talk a bit about my own experience. But I think in general, so my films are quite political and queer, and these kind of films you're not able to produce it in the normal system in Singapore. And that's also the other reason why I rely so much on all of them, because I need their support in order for me to survive, And I think, but in a general sense also, like when I see a film of ours in a commercial cinema, and I'm like, this is a big, fuck you to like cinema in general. Our films can be considered cinema, to me that's a pretty, for me it's quite queer, it's queering in a way, the sense. And of course these strategies of queering, what is the dominant discourse is very important to my work, and I think to some extent to the rest of the collective as well, yeah.
I also think that within our collective, that the idea to create a space that is not there yet, and also to, I think many of us grow up feeling that they have to adapt to a certain environment, or that they have to live camouflage, or maybe somehow feel that other people are in the power of shaping the way you navigate life. And I think for me that is one of the queerest parts structurally, that we just take up space and create our own visibility, and that we also prove to the public that what we do is valuable and also part of this whole system, and that in itself is I think a very queer act, especially obviously in contrast to the educational system of film schools, and also the system of broadcasting stations here in Germany in general. I sometimes think that what we did is also to hack the system of film production in a way, because films like ours normally don't exist in Germany, and that's I think something that we can be super out and proud about.
Are there any questions? Yeah, I think there's one here.
Where is the mic on this? Oh, okay. I've had this before, but it had a mic sticking out of it. So. Yeah, I actually I came to your talk the other day as well. What were the hacking of the production things that you did? I'm quite interested because I know there's medium board funding stuff here, but I'm just wondering if you're able to talk about it, if it was privately financed or what the situation was. Thanks.
I think that one very crucial tool in hacking the system was to create some sort of persona that I perform in talks to funding institutions or to possible like a commercial production company, for example, supported this project. And I think to be in that space and very confidently show that what we do is something that they should support with their money is I know that this is not everyone's, not everyone is feeling comfortable in doing that, but for the way I grew up, I think that's something that I somehow learned through being queer also, or through being queer and POC to let other people know that I'm there and that what I do is seeking a lot of attention and blah blah blah. So I think what I'm trying to say is that we had this so many times that we met actors who were a bit older than us, or professionals from the industry, and also funding partners, and we walked out and we were like, what did we just do? We were so professional and performing like we would know what we are doing. And it's I think that was just something very playful, but also very challenging, and
And also in a more concrete financial way, we got 100,000 euros from the Nord Media, so the this state of I can't say it in English, but maybe some people know. So it's federal funding, and we got it from because they have different Töpfe where they get their money from, and it's either from broadcasting stations, which is most of it, and then some of it is Ländermittel, so it's just from the state, I guess, and it's meant to be for art projects, and we got the maximum amount that you can get, and that was the biggest amount of what financed our film. So I think not being tied to a broadcasting station and not working together with a big production company gave us the maximum freedom to do the film, and still kind of enough money to pay people at least minimum wage. So yeah, I think that was kind of a practical hack that I don't know that we'll be able to do again. But
and also, quite frankly, we also asked a lot of institutions that normally fund social cultural projects and not films. So we had around 40,000 euros derived from at least 15 or 20 Stiftungen, I don't know what the English word is, but and foundations or NGOs. And there was it was a lot of work, but it also added up to a major part of our budget. And I think there was, because these foundations, they exist to support marginalized groups and their projects, and we felt like, well, in a way, if we don't get money from the funding institutions, because we applied for at least 800,000 and we ended up just getting 120,000 in the end from everyone, we need to find other money givers to support this, because this is also somehow a social cultural project.
Is this on still? No. I was also going to say, whoever this person who's broadcaster who's approached you, if that's 10,000 for 3 months full time, ask for more. Also, if you're acting like solo, not with an agent representing you, definitely ask for more. But that's just my opinion. So, thank you.
Hello. Oh, it's on. I'm sorry. This is so cute. I watched both of your works in this market, so I wanted to say, first I want to say good job, and really I'm impressed and really appreciate what you have achieved so far, so keep going. I'm from Taiwan, and I'm in the process of forming my own collective with a bunch of filmmakers or industry professionals. So I'm very curious. I have 2 questions. First of all, what are the things you fight about it the most? Because you share the same artistic and creative mission, but of course we all know that, and you also share that you have to, for example, freelance, other jobs, and then trying to find the right time to work together. So I'm just curious, like, what are you fighting the most? And the second thing is, I'm sure that you all have a lot of experience in directing, writing, editing, all kinds of different things. So if you have, let's say, if you expand your collective, what kind of skill set you will look for other members? So for example, are you looking for, since you do tax once a year, so you might want to have a collective member who's very strong in admin or or other type of the talents or personalities to join your collectives that can help you, further grow, right? We all want that. So these are my 2 questions. What are you fighting, and what are the personalities and features you're looking for, new members? Thank you.
I think when we first started, because we're all extremely different. Even the films we make are completely different from each other, and the way even what we want from cinema is very different. So, and I think this was a question that we, like Bitam said, like Tsekai said, we struggled with at the beginning. Who are we? What is our identity? And I think that was what we fought a lot at the beginning about. Like for example, I wanted. When that was 10 years ago, I was very young and I wanted to write a manifesto, and I wrote something very political, and then not everybody agreed with me, but like we all wanted something out of 13 Little Pictures, and we wanted 13 Little Pictures to be something for us, But I think over the years, we've stopped fighting actually. Actually, we hardly fight anymore, and I feel like although we disagree on a lot of things, but we don't fight, And I think we agree on like preserving this multiplicity of opinions, of also sexual orientation, of styles, of philosophies, And this difference is actually right now maybe the most important thing to us, is that we're also different from each other. And like I said earlier, when we first conceived of 13 Little Pictures like a meme, We wanted it to go viral. 10 years ago, there was no concept of the meme, but now I can say that was actually what we were discussing. We wanted everybody to embody this philosophy of collaboration, and community. So, we have the, financial entity of 13 Little Pictures, which is very rigid, and then which is 6 Chinese men, which is very awful. But then there's also what is actually Turning Into Pictures, in my opinion, which is a community which is very, very diverse, you know, and which is not even just Singaporean, it's also actually very regional, you know, throughout Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia. So I feel like this community is what we are actually aiming for, not the financial entity that is Turning Into Pictures, not the company that is Turning Into Pictures. And so I of course have no requirements for, or we have no requirements for anybody who wants to join, you know, because we all are Turning Into Pictures. That's our, you know, ultimate goal.
We fight a lot, but I think conflict is also a way to heal, or I don't know. I think it's important to tell each other if something is hurtful and to kind of grow together from that and learn. We fight the most, I think, about recognition and visibility. So like who gets attention, whose work is honored or rewarded in what ways. But I think that's a really important fights, and that's really important conflicts, and I'm really happy that we're talking and communicating so much about them. And I think for joining the collective, I think people with just different experiences and perspectives from us, because we need to be very diverse to grow and to be more political, and because we still have so many blind spots that we need and we want to work on, so that, and maybe also some people who like admin.
First of all, thanks to all of you for sharing all this with us. I have a question for the Jünglinge collective. If I could remember correctly, at the premiere you said it took you quite a while to fund your project. And since I'm going towards a similar situation where I'm trying to fund my project, and I know that there's often certain time spans that are linked to funding. For example, you said Nord Media gave you funding. Often they ask for the project to be realized or at least being started within a certain amount of time. So I wondered, how long did it take you from starting the funding phase to actually finishing the project? And how did you cope with these, you know, time spans that they asked for? Yeah, how did that work? Would be nice to know.
I think the funding institutions are the ones we worked with are very open to talk about their regulations and also to adjust them if you need more time for the funding, especially with the project that's small. They understand the difficulties in funding it, but having said that, our project was also part of a broadcasting program which we worked on 10 months, and then we were kicked out again, which was a super horrible experience for us. And through that, they already knew what we've been through, so they were very supportive. And I think in general, it took us maybe 1.5 or 2 years to finance the project, roughly. I think that we submitted the Antrag in 2016 and then shot in 2018.
But actually we wanted to shoot the movie 1 year before, and we expired because we thought, oh, we aren't ready yet, and we were also thought, okay, we don't have enough money to really shoot this film. But actually with the same amount of money, we shooted it 1 year later.
Because you asked, I think for us, at least, it turned out to be the best way we could possibly imagine this project to go without a broadcasting station, 100% freedom. And I think that's the best shot we've got working on a debut film. I mean, it's horrible because you don't have money, but then again, I think it reflects in the work.
And also you came here with distribution already, so it seems to have worked out.
hello. I would like to ask how your practice as a collective influence your work with other departments. For example, you mentioned before your DOP, but also with production design. Like, when do you get these persons on board, and how do you work with them? And yeah.
Yeah, as we just told, we all met in university. So I think at the beginning, a lot of music videos, we were collaborating with just like friends we knew from university, but also from our friends and friends. And also I think for us it's very, or I can just talk for myself. Actually, casting is something that isn't involved so early that we did. I think there was only 2 pages when I started casting, and I think it just depends on the people we are working with, like how early they jump into the project. Or for example, Simon, who is the cinematographer, was also part of the process at a very early stage.
Also the actors. I mean, that's actually something that was very significant, I think, in our work, that the actors already started to feedback and also act as dramaturgs when we all just had 10 pages or so. Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit worried that this is going to change now, where we somehow maybe work in a more professional, fast-paced context, because obviously that's like a very luxurious situation to have people who are ready to talk about stuff intensely already at this early stage, because everyone involved, the casting, the actors, the DP, they were all somehow also going under this process of fearing that this project might not happen at all. And that was just, I think, a very emotional and also self-exploitative phase for all of us, because you talk about it for years and still don't know if you're gonna do it.
Hi, I wanted to do a little comment and then a question. Very quick. I'm part of a filmmakers collective also in Panama, and I wanted to share a little bit the structure we have, because maybe it could be helpful. We are 5 years old now. We tried every model possible, and it's super frustrating to change every 6 months the model. But right now, what it works for us the best, it's we see ourselves like a freelancing. Well, first we have like a company structure, because in Panama, if you're not a company, you don't go anywhere. And basically, we are like freelance inside the company, and we depend on commercial works. So if I bring a commercial work, I am the producer or the project manager of the work, and I first throw the job to the table, to the collective, and if anyone wants to participate on it, like there's a salary for the project, and that's the way we have salary. So if anyone wants to work in a commercial project, you just don't, and that's it. And the company has a 30% fee for each commercial project, and this fee is very important because it's the amount that pays the bills, of course, but also is the money that works for investing in our own projects. And it's super important for us to make this, to charge this, because if someone wants to say like, no, we don't have that much money, in a point that they want to cut the 30%, we just don't work, because it's the only reason we're working on it. The only thing I don't like about this structure is that the commercial works are always a priority, and for me, it should be the opposite side. And it's super sad because at the end, we have to work like 3 jobs, you know, and we have to be super late working on our own films. So yes, that's my comment only on the structure. And my question actually is about the, for you guys, if you are you having like a company structure also, and you said like directors are the owners of their own films, and I wanted to understand like how does it legally work this, like if you share like director and the collective the ownership of the intellectual property, or is it all from the director, or how is the managing of the rights yes, I think that.
So for 13 Little Pictures, it is set up as a limited liability partnership. Yeah, so it is a partnership with the 5 members, Daniel, Jie Kai, Wang Ping, Sherman, and Xiu Hua. So if, say for example, there is profit screening fees, or when a film by Yuan Bin sells for perhaps a certain territory and stuff like that, the money goes to him. Yeah, so if it is Jie Kai's film that comes in, it goes to him. So it's very clear. Yeah, so I think that's how it works. So we try to keep it as simple as possible. That said, within the company itself, there is a 13 Little Pictures tax. So meaning whatever money that comes in, there's a 13% tax into the income that goes to the company. So that goes to the maintenance of the company, right? In terms of maybe hiring an accountant or something to, do the taxes, or for the maintenance of the website or stuff like that. Yeah.
On every job, on like whatever job you work on, 30% goes to the company.
It's
3%.
No, it's 13%, but then there is a scale to it. Yeah.
Maybe I should like to add that I think that a number of years ago, I think when after all of us here kind of made a debut through 13 Little Pictures, we had this conversation. For example, if we were given a commercial job, should we use 13 Little Pictures as a company? Because now that the name has some value to it, should we use this platform to do commercial work? And I think that was maybe one of the time when maybe there's a more heated discussion amongst all the members, because we all have a different perspective. Some members think that it's perfectly all right to just exploit it, but I think others kind of wanted to maintain the purity, I think, of the collective. And I think that in all these 10 years, I don't think we actually used the company in the end to do any kind of a commercial job. So I think that the way we do it is that if there's work, we kind of do it ourselves. Maybe we have our own company also, not 13 Little Pictures, or we work with other production companies to do the commercial work instead of doing it through 13 Little Pictures. So that it's really this collective is really just our personal films, and we preserve the spirit of it. Yeah, and I think that is a big reason, a big thing that kept us, I think, going all these 10 years. Yeah.
But I think also like being associated, because we've been around for so long, being associated with 13 Little Pictures already gives us a certain advantage over, and of course not just us, also the people who work with us. And so we don't actually require the company to act as the legal front for that, So of course people know that we are associated with 13 Little Pictures, and they will hire us individually, so they wouldn't need to hire the company 13 Little Pictures. And so that's how we also keep it very separate, and how there's no conflict.
I think we have maybe time for one last question.
If I understood correctly, you said for Futur Drei there was something special, a way that you did the casting, maybe that's not so traditional. Did I understand that correctly? Because if so, I would really like to hear about that.
Yeah, we've been casting over like 3 years. So
it was Raquel. It's not you say we, but it was it's you.
It was me. Yeah.
Completely, not collective.
And also. At the beginning we were thinking about like casting non-professional actors for the main cast. So we worked a lot with organizations and institutions who identify themselves as queer, post-migrant, work with queer refugees and stuff. And so the casting process was not only like a normal casting process and just more like a research process. We're not like where casting people, invite them and do a casting tape with them. We were more like talking with them. And at the beginning of the process, I was not really interested in the process of casting. I was more interested in questions of representation. And I was watching a lot of films and had a lot of questions regarding who can act or play which characters, so who's entitled to do so. So for me, like meeting people was like really important. Also, we did like theater academy before shooting, and we wanted to involve all the extras, everybody who you see in this film, to be a part of the production process as well. So every department, for example, Aydin, the main actor of Futur Drei, also did a workshop for acting for all the extras, or our costume designer came one day. And so I think the casting process was not just casting, but also like a really community space or community process, which had a lot to do with questions of representation and research of the story. And also I think the research and the casting process deeply influenced the way Paulina and Faraz were writing the script, because when Faraz and I met like some actor or some non-professional queer refugee, blah, blah, they also like reflected their way of writing the script, and we are talking about maybe we have to change this and that because this person told us about a certain experience. And I think that there are so multiple perspectives within the film. It was also, had something to do with the casting process as well.
Well, obviously, I think this discussion could go on for a lot longer, but I think it's also a nice note to end on, that there's this idea that a specific ethics of representation and the specific ethics of working together produces a specific kind of film, which is something that initially was, I think, something that we noticed about all of your work. But in any case, thank you very much for being here. Thanks also to the audience, and have a good rest of the festival.